I didn't understand what was happening at first. Nothing dramatic ever happened. No shouting matches, no slammed doors. Just a slow, steady tightening around my life that felt like help on the surface. Everyone around me thought my husband was the dependable type, the guy who takes care of things. I wanted to believe that too, right up until I realized I no longer made a single decision about my own life. Before we were married, things felt normal. I worked at a small diner. He delivered appliances around town. He didn't make a big income, but it was steady. When he suggested I quit the diner and stay home to take care of the house, it sounded old-fashioned, but harmless. I thought it would give us more time together and less stress. Instead, it became the start of me losing financial control one tiny step at a time. The first real change came quietly. He moved all our banking to one account and took my debit card. He said it was for simplifying things. I didn't argue. He started giving me cash instead, $40 a week to cover everything personal: shampoo, tampons, gas, anything he didn't buy during his grocery runs. It wasn't enough, but when I mentioned it to my sister, she joked that she wished someone paid all her bills. So I dropped it. But the cracks showed fast. Once, I ran out of gas trying to visit my mom and had to count change at the pump like a teenager. When I told him, he shook his head. "You gotta plan better, that's not my fault." That was his favorite line. Anything I struggled with was my fault. He also started policing how I kept the house. If I used too many paper towels, he pointed it out. If leftovers were thrown out, he acted like I'd committed a crime. He checked the trash, checked grocery use, checked everything. I had no privacy, no trust, no autonomy. One day, I found a pay stub in his pocket while doing laundry. The number at the bottom made my hands shake. He made more than enough money. All those warnings about being careful and keeping bills low were lies. Every time he'd said we had to tighten up, he meant I had to tighten up. After that, the control got bolder. He started doing the grocery shopping alone because I didn't stick to the list. He locked his wallet in the nightstand. He monitored the pantry. Once, he removed items entirely and taped a note that said, "Stop wasting food," like I was some irresponsible roommate instead of his wife. Still, I tried to keep peace. I kept the house spotless, cooked every meal, handled every chore. But the more I complied, the more he took. He cut my weekly cash to $30, saying, "You don't need as much since you're home all day." Then came the document, an itemized list of our household expenses with a space for my signature, like I was a tenant who owed him money. He wanted me to pay my share, using the allowance he gave me. I stared at the page, feeling something collapse inside me. This wasn't partnership. This was ownership disguised as budgeting. The biggest shift happened when he threw a bottle of shampoo into the sink because I bought it without asking first. He told me I had to follow the rules, like I was a child. Something cold and steady formed inside me. For the first time, the fear didn't make me freeze. It made me think. I wasn't imagining things. He wasn't traditional. He wasn't responsible. He was controlling me financially, step by step. And as he walked away that evening, muttering about women who don't appreciate anything, I made a quiet promise to myself. I was done living like this. And before he realized anything had changed, I had already started planning. The moment I decided I was done tolerating his control, everything he did became clearer. Instead of feeling guilty or confused, I started seeing patterns. Small rules turning into bigger ones, financial limits turning into outright restrictions. He wasn't stressed or struggling. He enjoyed having power over every part of my life. The escalation wasn't loud. It was quiet, practical, and humiliating. One morning, I opened the pantry and found half the shelves empty. He had moved several items somewhere else and taped a note inside the door. "Stop wasting food." No conversation, no explanation, just an order. When I asked about it that night, he didn't look up from the TV. "You throw out good stuff," he said. "I'm not buying groceries just so you can toss them." I had never thrown anything away without reason, but trying to explain that was pointless. He always acted like he knew my intentions better than I did. He monitored every small thing: how fast we went through paper towels, how often I used the oven, whether leftovers should have lasted another day. It felt like living with a supervisor, not a husband. He also cut my weekly money again, from $40 to $30. "We gotta be careful," he said. But I had seen his pay stub. He wasn't being careful, he was controlling access. When he realized I wasn't pushing back, he grew bolder. He locked his wallet in his nightstand. He double-checked receipts. He even moved items around the house just to see if I'd touched them. But the worst moment came when he slammed a folded packet of papers on the counter while I was making dinner. "House expenses," he announced. "Sign at the bottom." I studied the papers. It was a list of utilities, rent, and grocery totals, things he'd always handled voluntarily. Next to each item, he'd scribbled numbers that conveniently added up to an amount I could never afford on the tiny allowance he gave me. "You want me to pay you back?" I asked. "Not all of it," he said. "Just what's fair." Fair, according to him, meant paying for things with money he controlled. "I don't have that kind of money," I said. "Well," he shrugged, "don't use so much." That sentence hit me like a slap. I wasn't just being monitored. I was being financially trapped. A few days later, it got worse. I'd saved coins from old pockets and bought myself a cheap bottle of shampoo. When he came home and saw it, he grabbed it and held it up. "You didn't ask," he said like it was a crime. "It's shampoo," I said. "I needed it." "You don't get to decide what we spend money on." Then he tossed the bottle into the sink, hard enough to make it echo. That was the breaking point. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't argue. Something inside me clicked, the kind of calm that comes when fear finally burns off. He wanted me to be dependent, so I couldn't leave. Every rule, every limit, every missing dollar was part of that structure. And that meant one thing: if I wanted out, I couldn't confront him. I had to outmaneuver him. The next morning, while he was at work, I sat at the kitchen table and made a list of what I still controlled. My time while he was gone, my ability to work weekends, my access to the bus, my relationships he didn't bother monitoring, and most importantly, my growing clarity. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew exactly what I was planning around. A man who kept me financially small, so I couldn't stand on my own. Standing on my own would be the one thing he never expected, and it would be the first step toward taking my life back. Once I accepted that I had to leave quietly, everything became strategy. I didn't act different around him. I still cooked dinner, folded laundry, and nodded when he lectured me about spending. The less he noticed, the more time I had to work in the background. The first step was getting some income he couldn't track. I called the diner from the laundry room, the only place in the house with a door that locked and a fan loud enough to cover my voice. Denise, the manager, didn't hesitate. "We'll put you on weekends," she said. "Come in whenever you're ready." Weekend shifts were perfect. He always spent Saturdays drinking with his friends, and Sundays he was too hungover to care where I was. I worked short shifts, collected tips, and walked home with pockets full of small bills he never asked about. Next, I needed a bank account he didn't know existed. I took the bus, an hour each way, to a credit union in another town. I opened the account with the $40 I'd saved from tips and loose change. It felt pathetic handing the teller that little pile of money, but she smiled and said, "Everyone starts somewhere." I held myself together until I got outside. Then I started gathering evidence. Not dramatic evidence. Quiet, boring, undeniable facts. I photographed the note in the pantry telling me to stop wasting food. I saved the list of expenses he wanted me to sign. I screenshotted texts where he told me what I wasn't allowed to buy. I kept pictures of the cash amounts shrinking every week. I documented the locked nightstand drawer. He thought he controlled the narrative. He didn't realize every petty rule made my case stronger. But I needed something neutral, someone who could confirm that he handled all finances alone and kept me out of them. That someone ended up being our landlord. He lived 2 doors down and took pride in keeping the properties honest and well run. One afternoon, while he was trimming the hedges, I walked over and asked, "Can I talk to you, privately?" He took one look at me and said, "Sure." I explained everything, not with emotion, just facts. When I showed him the photos and the pay stub, he nodded slowly. "This isn't right," he said. "He's isolating you financially." "I know," I said. "I need something official." He thought for a moment. "I can print copies of the rent records. They'll show he paid everything himself. If he ever claimed you were responsible for bills, the paperwork will prove otherwise." That was exactly what I needed. Not revenge, documentation. We met twice in his backyard where nobody could see. He handed me the rent receipts and a short statement confirming that I had never been involved with the payments. It wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful. Quiet proof always is. After that, the plan moved faster. I hid my earnings inside a stack of old holiday decorations he never touched. I saved every dollar. I waited until he had back-to-back long delivery shifts, a rare stretch of hours where he wouldn't be home early. On the second morning, he left at 5 a.m., barely glancing at me. That was his mistake. I watched his taillights fade, then packed only what was mine: clothes, toiletries, and the envelope of evidence. I didn't take a single thing he could accuse me of stealing. My heart was pounding as I locked the door behind me, but the fear wasn't the same as before. There was something steady underneath it, something that felt almost like relief. I walked to the bus stop with my bag over my shoulder and the first real plan I'd had in years. I didn't know exactly what would happen next, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He'd spent years making sure I couldn't leave. And now I was leaving in a way he would never be able to rewrite. My mom didn't ask for details the moment I showed up with a duffel bag. She just opened the door, hugged me tight, and said, "You're staying here." It was the safest I had felt in years. When I finally sat down and showed her the envelope of evidence, the notes, the photos, the fake expense sheet, the rent records, her face went hard. She didn't say, "Go back," or try to work it out. She said, "We're doing this right." I blocked him that same afternoon. Not for drama, for peace. My mom's landline became the only number he could reach. That evening, the phone rang over a dozen times before she finally answered with it on speaker. He wasn't worried, or scared, or apologetic. He was angry. "She walked out without permission," he snapped. "You tell her to get back here and stop acting crazy." "She's not coming back," my mom said calmly. He started ranting. How I owed him, how I used him, how I was making things complicated. Listening to him talk about me like I was a broken appliance made something settle deep inside me. I had not imagined anything. He didn't miss me. He missed control. My mom hung up mid-sentence. The next morning, our landlord called. "He's pacing around the property, telling me you left him with bills he can't manage," he said. "I already told him rent is paid through the month, and that you spoke to me about financial concerns before you left." For the first time, his lies ran into someone else's truth. I filed for legal separation the same week. Not divorce yet. Separation let me request full financial disclosure. Every bank statement, every paycheck, every expense he'd hidden behind his "I'm just being responsible" routine. The clerk helping me didn't look surprised when she saw the documents I brought. She just nodded like she'd seen this pattern too many times. Within days, he was served papers. He tried calling from random numbers, tried showing up near my mom's house, tried passing messages through my sister. Every version painted him as the hard-working victim abandoned by an ungrateful wife. But whenever he tried that line, someone would ask the question he couldn't spin away. "If you were so supportive, why did she only have $30 a week?" No answer. Just silence or more anger. The real hit came during mediation. He sat down across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight, expecting me to crumble or apologize. Instead, the mediator laid out the documentation: the restricted cash, the forced expenses sheet, the landlord's written statement, the screenshots showing his control. This establishes a pattern of financial restriction, the mediator said. Given this, she is entitled to temporary support while she rebuilds independence. He inhaled sharply, like the air had been knocked out of him. He wasn't used to consequences that didn't come from intimidation. He'd built his power on keeping everything private. Now privacy was gone, replaced with paperwork. I moved forward piece by piece. I went back to the diner full time. I opened mail with my name on it. I bought basics without feeling guilty. Shampoo, groceries, a new pair of sneakers. I got a small studio a few months later. Nothing fancy. Just clean walls, quiet mornings, and a kitchen where nobody monitored what I cooked or how I used paper towels. The first night in that little apartment, I sat on the floor eating cheap takeout, surrounded by empty boxes. I wasn't crying from sadness. I was crying from how light everything felt. I had proof. I had distance. I had my own life again. People think abuse always looks dramatic, but sometimes it looks like budgeting, or responsibility, or rules. Sometimes it sounds like, don't waste money, or you don't need that, or I'm just trying to help. It creeps in quietly until you wake up realizing you can't buy shampoo without permission. Leaving wasn't revenge. The paperwork was. My revenge was living a life he no longer had access to, funded by support payments he never expected to owe, backed by records he never thought I'd gather. I didn't break him. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out with receipts. And he's been paying for it, literally and figuratively, ever since.